You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Hey there, folks, and welcome to episode number 145 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and I am the host of the Just Japan podcast, this weekly podcast that brings you all things Japan-like. And we've got a great episode for you this week, an interview with first-time guest James Reynolds from Earth Uncut TV. This is a great one, folks. I'm really excited to share this with you. James is a new resident to Japan, but he's been living in Asia for many years, and he's got a pretty darn cool job. He's a typhoon chaser. That's right. He spends his days and nights traveling around to Asia, filming fierce, violent, crazy weather, and with that incredible footage, he makes a living. So you're going to be really excited with this interview. James has some great tales of adventure. He talks about filming typhoons, filming bad weather, filming volcanoes, and man, he does a lot of cool stuff. So you're gonna like this one, folks. Alright, of course, the Just Japan podcast can be found on all major podcatchers, Libsyn, iTunes, all that stuff. And the home of the Just Japan podcast is over at justjapanstuff.com. You want to find out more about the podcast or more about Japan in general, go over to justjapanstuff.com. There's a lot of really great articles that are popping up on the site now. Lots of stuff about food, living in Japan, all kinds of stuff, Japan hacks, and you're going to see as the days, the weeks, the months go on, the Just Japan Stuff website will be evolving more and more and becoming more of a place for great written information about Japan. We've got a few writers, we got some new writers over there, a few writers. We've got some food bloggers, coffee bloggers, travel bloggers, and a whole lot more. So I'll be writing for justjapanstuff.com, and also we're gonna have a lot of other awesome people writing for it as well. And I want to thank all of you out there who are participating in the Just Japan, in justjapanstuff.com, and helping create content for it. It's a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see where this project goes. So one thing I do want to mention, you might be saying to yourself, hey, wait a second, Kevin, there was no Just Japan News podcast last week. I apologize. Life schedule was pretty insane, some pretty crazy technical issues, this and that. A lot of things got in the way of putting that episode together last week. So it's missed. Can't catch up on it. But this upcoming weekend, there will be, of course, a new Just Japan News podcast with more, chock full of more news to make up for the week that I missed. So you can expect that to drop on the weekend. Another little bit of news, we have yet again another Just Japan podcast merchandise campaign. So if you want to support the Just Japan podcast, you can do so by getting yourself a really awesome Just Japan podcast t-shirt, hoodie, or coffee mug. That's right, over at Teespring, we got this going on. So over at teespring.com, Just Japan podcast, it's just-japan-podcast-spring-2007. The link will be in the show notes, and I'll be sharing it all over my social media. The links, it's going to be on the Twitter feed at JLandKev. It's going to be on the Facebook page. It's going to be all over the place. So just go check it out over at teespring.com. This will be going on until March 8th, 2017. So you've got about 20 days to get over there and pick up your Just Japan podcast shirt or coffee mug or hoodie and support the show. So again, I'll be sharing that all over the social media, and there will be a link over at justjapanstuff.com. So hey, folks out there in Just Japan podcast land, let's get right into the interview and let's find out all about this very interesting man, Mr. James Reynolds from Earth Uncut TV.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Cool. Okay, folks. And I'm very happy this evening to be talking with Mr. James Reynolds. James, thank you for coming on the Just Japan podcast.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's an honor to be with you, and I look forward to chatting.
Yeah, well, I mean, each week different people come on the podcast, and I have to admit that this interview will be kind of a unique one with regards to jobs people have. I've covered a lot of jobs over the years I've been doing this podcast. Talked to a lot of different people who do a lot of different things, but definitely no one's job quite fits the description of yours.
Yeah, it's a little unusual. I still haven't actually figured out my own job description yet because people say, "What are you doing?" I still to this day, I'm like, "Yeah, video producer, cameraman." I don't know. I'm still trying to work out the job description myself.
When you do a Google search for your name, I think some of the terms that pop up, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, is typhoon hunter.
Yeah, that was one of my early marketing, self-promotional names. It's still actually my YouTube channel name. I haven't been able to change it. But yeah, hunting typhoons is part of the job. There's volcanoes in there as well, and all sorts of other kind of big natural events.
Yeah. Okay. So for those out there listening, you're already wondering what the heck's going on here, guys. Like, what is this man talking about? So before we really get into the kind of I don't know, the meat of what you do. Can you tell the Just Japan podcast listeners, first of all, a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you're currently doing in Japan?
Well, yeah, I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living in Asia for coming on for 11 years now.
Okay.
To begin with, I was in Shanghai and then Hong Kong for a long time, for the last 7 or 8 years. And met a beautiful young lady who's from Japan. That was quite a while ago now, in Hong Kong. And then we got married, we had children, and then recently we decided that it was time for her to head home, so to speak. So we moved to Tokyo just in December.
Well, okay, so you're very new to Japan, huh?
I'm really new, and my wife's Japanese, but she speaks fluent English because she studied in the UK. We've never lived in Japan together, so yeah, in that respect, it's all very much new, very new to me. So I've been a regular visitor for a long time, but it's only been short trips, 3 or 4 days, and I've really enjoyed it visiting. But now I'm here to live, and it's fantastic. I'm really excited about it.
Great, and you're in Tokyo, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. In Tokyo, that's where my wife's working in the city, and it's a good place for me to be based, doing what I do, which I suppose we'll get onto in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess we've already kind of mentioned a little bit. I mean, what you do is a very interesting work. You do a lot of video work and editing work and this and that. So maybe could you? Well, actually, yeah. So could you tell the Just Japan podcast listeners what is it that you do for a living?
Well, I think the most basic way of putting it, I'm a video producer. Okay. So I wouldn't call myself a cameraman because there's a lot of very specific skills involved with that, which I'm certainly not well trained up on. But the thing which kind of makes my work a little different is I've really got this very specific niche of covering nature. Okay. So not wildlife, forget the animals and all that, not into that. But natural disasters, significant natural events. So we're talking typhoons, tropical storms, volcanic eruptions, floods, tsunamis or the aftermath of them, earthquakes, and all those kind of types of things. Now, people might think, "Oh gosh, that's horrible. It's really depressing and just all disasters and all that." I just like to point out it's not. A lot of these events take place and no one's in the way getting hurt. But often the kind of the flip side of the coin is there are some unpleasant sides to the job as well. So it's kind of a mix. It's all focused in that kind of, let's say, National Geographic Discovery Channel kind of content when it comes to planet Earth.
Okay. So I mean, I look at your, for example, your YouTube channel that is Earth Uncut TV. And you've got a lot of footage up there of a lot of, like you said, like a lot of wild weather.
Yeah, that's it.
A lot of really wild weather. And for everyone out there listening, and the links will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com, but definitely you got to go over to James' YouTube channel, Earth Uncut TV. Go subscribe to it and watch some of the stuff he does. It's really great. And I've got definitely some interesting questions. My son was quite horrified and amazed, my 6-year-old, watching a certain video of you kind of looked like rappelling into a volcano in Italy, which I want to ask you about later. So how did you get into this profession? Because I've met a lot of people who have an interest in things like, for example, wildlife photography or video or kind of that kind of outdoors type thing. But this is a new one for me. So how did you find? What was your path that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's not a job which kind of has a pretty defined career path.
Yeah.
The careers officer in high school or university isn't. It's not on their list of suggestions. No, just really spontaneously kind of just took a path without any real direction and ended up just doing this. Mostly with a lot of luck, but a lot of passion driven behind it as well. Look, living in Asia for a long time, well, back in the early days, 10, 11, 12 years ago, I just loved traveling. I did a lot of backpacking around the area, and it was just through that traveling that I got exposed to lots of exotic environments, the occasional tropical storm and typhoon, and I realized that there was so much going on in the Asia Pacific region. And I got really, this bug. I wanted to just see more of what was going on, specifically to do with like the natural events, the volcanoes, the wild weather and stuff. So yeah, I would just go out of curiosity. I think that was the real driving force. I was just curious to see these crazy events, which growing up in the UK, I would never ever see. It's a very benign and pretty calm place when it comes to like geology and geography and all that. So I just really went out of my way in Taiwan to begin with. I spent some time there as a student. And that's what introduced me to the typhoons. And I just went out and recorded them on a really shoddy little video camera, which wasn't the best piece of equipment I've ever owned. And then from there, people just saw I was shooting unique, stuff which hasn't been really broadcast much. And remember, this is in the early days of YouTube.
So you were putting that stuff on YouTube in those early days? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering how people discovered you or how they found your work.
It was really through YouTube.
Okay.
That's how it all really started to begin. And I had a few photos online, but I remember the first time was this documentary producer in Germany is like, we're making a documentary on typhoons with I think it was with NHK or someone like that.
Okay.
Hey, can we use some of your shots? We'll give you some money for it. And I was like, sweet. That's cool. And really that kind of like was the start of the, I suppose the snowball rolling down the hill, and it kind of grew from there. Go out, shoot more footage. People would be interested in it, and then the sales would slowly build up, or the footage licensing, and then CNN came knocking on the door, and the Weather Channel, and people like that. So I think it was the curiosity was really what drove it all, and just a passion for being on the road and seeing crazy, unique, rare stuff.
Wow. So I'm curious, by the way, what was that first camera that you had?
Oh, I'm kind of ashamed to say it was like the mini disc player of cameras. It was one you actually slotted mini CDs into it.
Oh, wow,
and it would burn the video on. I think it was a format which just died a deserved death pretty quickly.
Nice.
It was a nightmare. The video was really difficult to edit. The DVDs got damaged really easily. I almost lost some footage. So,
wow.
But now technology's come a long way since then. That was in 2006. So
thankfully. Okay, so I mean, now obviously this is something that you do as a living. So I mean, you were based in Hong Kong for a number of years. Now you're based out of Tokyo. I'm really curious, and I mean, this may sound like such a naive question, but I watch TV shows, the kind of air quotes reality shows in the States of storm chasers, and it's quite a big thing in the States. I mean, a lot of people do it as a hobby in the United States, storm chasing, but typhoon kind of chasing and volcano I guess you don't really chase a volcano, do you? Um,
Sometimes they chase you if
sometimes
they
they
erupt.
chase. Yeah, yeah. So how? I mean, are there many people doing this kind of thing here in Asia?
Not, I would say not internationally. No, there aren't many people. I do know some people who just live in the areas which are affected and like to go out and snap pictures and videos and stuff.
Yeah, because I think of
But
like
there,
in my case, or like I was a YouTuber for many years, and I still have a YouTube channel, and I kind of tool around with it sometimes. And I've some YouTuber friends, and that's kind of like when they capture typhoons in Japan. It happens to be like there's a typhoon rolling over where they live, so hop outside with the camera.
yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And but really, to people who buy plane tickets, ship off for a few days and get in front of these storms. There's not many people uh, living out here who do that,
Okay.
and kind of for good reason.
Well, yeah.
It's
So that's what you do right there, and that's the other thing that leads me into asking what I wanted to ask you. So how does it work? Like, is it the kind of thing? Obviously, I'm sure that you probably follow the weather and the region maybe a little more intently than others. And when you see that there's some kind of major weather heading somewhere, is that what you just hop onto a plane and you're like, let's go do this?
Yeah, that's really the kind of the gist of it, because these days, technology for weather forecasting, it's really good.
Hmm.
And up to 7 to 10 days ahead of a big typhoon, there are often pretty clear indicators that something's going to spin up and it might
Yeah.
head, say, somewhere between Taiwan and Japan, or just for example.
Yeah.
So I do get quite a good lead time. So obviously there's quite a bit of behind the scenes preparation, mostly kind of mentally, which
Mm.
goes on like, right, I got to prepare myself for a storm trip. And then, yeah, normally within 2 or 3 days, I can normally pretty confidently like pull the trigger and get everything, all the logistics sorted, plane tickets booked, all the cameras charged, and then jump on a plane and yeah, wherever it looks like the storm's gonna head.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Okay. And you know what? I have to admit the gear geek in me has to ask because I do. I'm into as a hobbyist. Actually, I'm into nature photography, wildlife photography. One of my
Oh,
hobbies.
nice.
Yeah, I've got a Nikon kicking around here. I've got a Canon D50 as well, and a bunch of lenses all over my room
Yeah,
here.
nice.
My man cave. But they tend to be smaller things like ducks and birds and whatnot that I find around here are things in the mountains. And so I'm curious, what's your kind of standard if you're going to head out to say Taiwan or somewhere in Japan to cover a big storm? What kind of equipment do you bring with you?
It's kind of constantly evolving,
Uh-huh.
really, because it's always like weighing up, like, do I take a big camera? It shoots better quality footage, but then it's more weight to lug around, and
Mm.
it's harder to keep dry. But right now, I'll tell you, I got, Sony brought out this awesome new camera, the A7S Mark II, and people have been raving about it, how it's so good in low light and it shoots really good video. So I kind of, I just took the plunge and shifted to like using a DSLR instead of
Oh, okay.
the big traditional video camera, which I've been using seriously for the last 7 years. So I'm quite excited about taking that into a typhoon and seeing how I get on. It's going to be a little bit of a shift in the style
Mm.
but then these days GoPros, of course, you
Yeah.
strap those to your cars or your head, and they
Mm.
get some interesting shots. I've got a drone which I mostly use I plan to use for the volcano stuff and any dramatic aftermath scenes of an event. And you know what? The iPhone. I shoot
Mm.
a lot of video on the iPhone because sometimes you just got to be quick and
Yeah, exactly. It's the
whip
fastest
that
way
out
to.
of your pocket and get some snap, especially for social media, Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
These are kind of video hungry platforms, and just having the iPhone take care of all that is fun. Is really useful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't do what you do, but I have to admit, my coworkers. I mean, I work at an international school. I'm an elementary school teacher, and even my coworkers always kind of scratch their heads and wonder because every day I come into the teacher's room and I got my backpack. I cycle to work every day, and I come in with my
Oh,
backpack on, and I always have a big camera bag, and I put my camera bag down. They're like, "Why do you have that?" I'm like, "Well, I carry it with me everywhere I go because you never know."
that's
You never
Awesome.
know.
Nah, that's very smart.
You
That's
never know
cool.
when something might happen, and you never know when you might see
Exactly.
something really cool. So I always have an iPhone, and then normally I have at least a Nikon DSLR with me,
Well,
just in case.
especially in Japan, where there's so much just interesting stuff going on anyway, and
True.
then
Yeah.
obviously the surprises happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
more so here than in plenty of other parts of the world.
That is so true. So I mean, okay. So I mean, um, I've been watching your videos, and I mean, some of these videos I've seen of you in Taiwan and some of these typhoons, and there was one where it was like I think you said almost sucked out from under a building, and there was one where I saw like you were in like it looked like a I don't know if it was a lobby of like a kind of a small hotel or apartment building, and there was like this man trying to hold the doors closed, and then he almost got sucked out into the typhoon, and I'm wondering like obviously it's not always very safe putting yourself in these situations. Um, is it just I'm going to assume that over the years of doing this you've kind of developed how shall I say, I don't know, the kind of the instincts, the way of thinking to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's probably without sounding cliche, but it's the most important part of my job, and it's where I have to perform the best to be able to do my job properly. Is just figuring out how to keep safe, and
Mm.
I take it very seriously. Um, and you kind of learn from the mistakes you make in the past, and I've certainly made plenty of those. Um, but look, no, these typhoons scare me, volcanoes scare me, even more so now that I've got two young kids as well, and a family which depend on me being around.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but that's it's a huge part of the job, and it's the part I take the most seriously. Because look, at the end of the day, if I'm not feeling safe, I can't get on with my work, which is making sure the camera's set up and shooting what I need to shoot and basically taking in whatever's happening in front of me. The last thing I want to be doing in the middle of a typhoon or a volcanic eruption is worrying about my own safety, because that's when things have a habit of spiraling out of control very quickly.
Wow.
And surprises do come along. Let's just say things can escalate very rapidly. But like the example of that video you were just talking about with the
Yeah.
security guard getting sucked out of the building almost.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice way of putting it. Things can escalate rapidly. So, in kind of your earlier days of this career, what maybe can you share one of these, maybe something that you did that maybe wasn't the smartest thing that could have been done, that maybe kind of
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like tales of misadventure.
Well, there was a good one in actually in Japan and down in Okinawa. Like I'd had a run of I'd say two typhoons where I wasn't exactly in the right place for. So I'd put a lot of time, effort, and money into shooting two previous storms, which hadn't really worked out how I'd planned. I was feeling pretty bummed out. So the next storm came along a couple of weeks later, and I was like so determined to get into the right place and shoot it, and ended up just driving into the middle of the typhoon in the middle of the night. I couldn't see anything. There was just blinding white out through the windscreen of the car. Pulled up in this little road station, which I've been to before, but totally forgetting in the heat of the moment that it was literally right by a seawall. And obviously, as the typhoon was coming over, the sea started like invading my area. I couldn't escape. I almost lost the car. Thankfully, I just moved it to a little bit of an elevated area before that would have been washed away. And thankfully, no, it was a pretty unpleasant situation, because I was like pinned down and the waves were coming in, and I was like, if the water gets significantly higher, I'm done for. But thankfully it didn't. And I learned a lot from experiences like that, and not to get cocky and kind of second guess nature and take crazy risks like that. So those are the kind of examples I was talking about, where you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, wow.
And I have to say, the toilets overflowed, and I was standing in sewage for half of the time as well, so that was pretty unpleasant.
Oh, just yeah.
It
Wow.
was a bad scene all around.
Wow. So, I mean, okay, so you've got a lot of experience filming typhoons, but also volcanoes are something that you specialize in.
Yes, love volcanoes. They're just amazing, amazing things. Incredible.
I've never seen one, aside from on TV or like, going past a sleeping one like Fujisan.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been filming volcanoes and getting footage of volcanoes erupting and all of that?
Well, my first, I think it was back in 2009, took the leap into that. Like typhoons were always my first interest and love, so to speak. But then I realized that, look, you know, I've got such a fascination with all sorts of natural events. Volcanoes seem like the kind of the perfect thing to like move into. And yeah, since then I've been privileged to kind of witness some pretty crazy volcanic events. All around Asia, really, from plenty in Japan, Philippines, Indonesia, and yeah, no, they just possess this real energy. Some of them are pretty sinister as well, and they're scary places, but they're quite amazing as well. There's something, it's difficult to put into words, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah. I mean,
something very majestic and beautiful, but also very scary about them.
yeah, I've definitely seen some clips on your channel. Again, everyone, Earth Uncut TV, of volcanoes. I've seen some. I've watched a few of the ones you've had like in Indonesia and here in Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but there's one I want to actually get to first. I want to, there was this one video of you and some other, I assume some colleagues of yours in Stromboli, Italy. Is that right? Stromboli? I don't know
Um,
how to say that.
yeah, that was the volcano before. I think you talk about the guys in the crazy heat
Yeah,
suits.
were you one of those crazy guys?
That, that was in Vanuatu, I should add,
Oh, that
in
was
the South
Vanuatu.
Pacific.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay,
that was
okay.
in Vanuatu. And no, I'm not brave enough to do that. Plus, if you're down there on the wire, you can't get the good shots. So I was like, I'll get the cool shots of these guys doing that thing without taking the big risk.
You were
But no,
filming the
that
guys climbing down into a volcano.
yeah, no, it was
Oh,
pretty cool. To explain it to your listeners who might be wondering exactly what we're talking about, is this in Vanuatu. There's this volcano called Ambrim, or Maram volcano on Ambrim Island. It's got this big lava lake. It's just churning away. And yeah, we managed to get these shots of these guys like abseiling down, and it looked as if they were really close to the lava, and it generated quite a bit of buzz, that footage. It was
wow.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious, as someone who, as a living, you go and you jump in front of typhoons and film them, and get into them and film them, or you go to volcanoes and film them. Do you spend a lot of time actually, studying, being a student of these things, reading about them online, reading books, learning about the behavior of these different events?
Yeah, I do. I'm by no means a volcanologist or a meteorologist, and those the women and men who do that, like I've got huge amounts of respect for, because these are such complex and difficult to understand forces of nature. But I'd say, yeah, my understanding is kind of greater than the average person.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, I find it fascinating. I'm always trying to look at what's happened in the past to see what effect might be in the future, with volcanic eruptions, and these volcanoes. Some of them erupt with certain regularity, and yeah, it's just helps me get a better understanding of the kind of the forces which I'm filming.
Mm.
And the same with typhoons. I like interested in the history and the way they shape cultures, and the landscapes and the places they affect.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, here in Japan, if someone wanted to see a volcano erupting, where should they go?
Um, you'd asked me 6 months ago. I said go to Kyushu, because
Okay.
that's the awesome place. But all the volcanoes there have kind of stopped erupting.
Oh, okay.
Like
So in Kyushu, like
everything's
Sakurajima, right?
curiously quiet at the moment. Yeah, Sakurajima has basically been erupting every day for the last however many years, well, like 10, 15 years. And now it's just suddenly stopped for like the last 6 months. Um,
Mm.
and I'm sure it'll start popping again. But yeah, no, look, if anyone's interested in going to a fantastically volcanic area and witnessing volcanoes do their thing safely, I'd highly recommend Sakurajima. But then also Kirishima, that whole area around that in southern Kyushu is just stunningly volcanic, and I'd highly recommend it.
Wow. So when you go to a place like that to film, do you go down there and like charter a boat, that kind of thing? And
Well, not I would not in Japan because that would probably be terribly expensive.
True
But
enough.
yeah, in places like Indonesia.
Taxis in Japan are bloody expensive. Yeah,
Trust me, I've
let
thought
alone a
about
boat.
it. But again, we're going back to what you were saying. There've been some historical eruptions where a boat would be necessary, and I'd be like, "Oh, I need to look into the logistics," but I might be a little too much for me.
Okay, okay,
But no,
fair enough.
certainly in like Indonesia, yeah, some volcanoes we've had to charter speedboats and stuff to get to, and it's a lot of fun, and that's one of the is one of the most important and most rewarding aspects of my work for me is often the volcano or the typhoon or whatever is really just a small part of a grand adventure, and just
Mm,
getting there is half the fun.
yeah.
I often, my friend and I, we often say, it's the volcanoes and the typhoons just give us a great excuse to go to places we'd never otherwise have any reason to go to. And it's
Nice.
those kind of places where you see awesome things and meet cool people and eat strange things.
Nice, nice. And I guess, I mean, recently, just even a few days ago, I mean, it might not be as quite as exotic as, racing in a speedboat in Indonesia to a volcano, but you were up in northern Japan enjoying the weather, huh?
Yeah, I love snow because I'm British and it doesn't snow in England. So whenever it did, it was like, oh, this is exciting. And then living in Hong Kong for the last 8 years,
Sure, not
it's
much snow
obviously
there, huh?
no snow there. So yeah, Japan's the snowiest place in the world. So it's right on my doorstep. Snow country, and I plan to spend a lot of time there in the winter. It's I'm excited to live somewhere where there's four distinct seasons, because Hong Kong the winters were just polluted and boring. So here I've got a whole area to play in and have fun
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and call it and work, I suppose, in inverted commas.
True, true, true. Work and play at the same time in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot
Uh,
of that.
so okay, so I'm curious. So how does the process work? I mean, you go to this typhoon area or you go to a volcanic area and you get all this footage and then you head back home. And what happens then? How does what does your job entail after that? You got cameras, you got SD cards or memory cards filled with footage. What happens?
Well, it's kind of split into, I'd say, two aspects of the way the work takes place. Is I'd say the first aspect is actually being like on the ground reporter. So that's
Okay.
where the kind of the journalism aspect of things come in. I'd say I'm not a journalist, but often I'm the first person on a scene of a major international news story, if it's a big typhoon or a volcano. So I'll feed that footage to my regular news partners who I've
Okay.
worked with for a long time. So that's like CNN, the Weather Channel, and then anyone else who comes knocking and wanting footage.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd say the news aspect, and then there's the long term value of the footage which I shoot, which is for, I'd say, like the documentary market.
Okay.
So that's what I'm really trying to shoot. Is I'm trying to shoot the outstanding documentary footage. I want to capture these natural events in the most stunning, dramatic, amazing way possible on video. Sometimes I fail miserably in doing that. Other times I do okay.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so and if Nat Geo are making a big documentary or a film on something and they need footage, hopefully I've got it and they come along and license it from me. And that's basically how the business rolls along, and I get to put a roof over my head and keep my stomach full.
Nice, nice. I'm curious, do you ever get any knocks on the door from academics, like scientists or researchers, people who are studying typhoons or studying like volcanologists?
Yep. Yeah, you would be amazed at the number of different applications for video these days. And when I say documentaries or whatever, actually that in itself is a very small part of who ends up using my footage. But yeah, no, I've had a very good relationship with the Hong Kong Observatory. They're the weather forecasting agency in Hong Kong. I've had NASA coming looking for some footage to use, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Oh wow.
I'm a big Twitter fan. I have a good, I'd say, a good relationship with a lot of volcanologists and meteorologists on Twitter as well. And these guys really dig seeing images coming in from the field, because they don't get to see these things firsthand a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I think they get quite a kick out of being able to kind of get first dibs on what images and reports of what's happening in the field in the kind of the area of expertise. So
Yeah,
no, it's
nice.
good. It's good to be able to contribute like that every now and again.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, no. I just assumed obviously there would be people who are obviously interested in studying the kind of mechanics of these things and how they work, and I'm sure of course, like a lot of scientists, they may study these, but they don't necessarily get into them like you do.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, very cool. So I'm curious. Another hardware geek, another geek question with regards to computer stuff. What do you use as far as computers go when it comes to your editing and whatnot?
Well, I'm a bit rubbish myself with the whole computer side of
Okay.
things, so I can't give you the actual technical spec. But I'm a PC guy, which goes against
Okay.
the majority flow of people in like the creative photography and video
I'm a Mac
industry.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would, if I had to put money on it, I would have said Mac.
Yeah.
The odds would have been good on that. No, but I use a really good editor. It's a bit of software called Edius.
Okay.
It's kind of like what I would call a boutique editor. It's like it's pretty guerrilla. You can just throw all sorts of video from 5 different cameras, different frame rates and sizes into it, and it'll all just crunch it all up, and
Oh,
you
nice.
can edit it all together and then churn out a video at the end of it. So it's really good. Very versatile, and I've been using that for 6-7 years now.
Nice.
And it's great.
Cool.
And then and I'm using the smartphone now. Literally the last 18 months, that in itself is now a camera editor and broadcasting unit in itself. So I think as the iPhone or whatever the Samsung technology improves over the years as well, I'm going to be relying on that more and more as well.
Well, I think the cameras just get better and better. Than if you're using something like an iPhone, you're going to have iMovie built right in there.
Exactly,
And,
so I do use that for if I get some. I normally try and knock off some dramatic shots on the iPhone, just so I can do quick stuff for Twitter and even some of the news guys these days. They're just rush, need footage as quickly as possible. So it's often iPhone footage.
Yeah. I'm really curious. I mean, now, you've mentioned Twitter a few times already, and I have to admit, I'm a big Twitter fan. I've been on Twitter for quite a number of years, and to be honest, like this podcast, the Just Japan podcast, probably wouldn't be what it is today, or it probably wouldn't even be around if it wasn't for Twitter. And I think that's because I find the majority of my guests, the guests for this show, on Twitter. And, I tend to just, how it works. It's kind of a rabbit hole. You find someone, you follow them, and then you kind of maybe find other people who you should follow, and da-da-da-da-da. And, I've just found a lot of fascinating people, and I just surf around Twitter a lot, finding people and asking them to come on the podcast. How invaluable, I suppose, would you find Twitter in your profession?
Well, Twitter has bought me business. It doesn't happen very often, but I think my first gig with CNN came along through Twitter, through an exchange with one of the on-air meteorologists there. They were like, "James, you got any footage? Can you send it through? DM me." And then that was the start of a blossoming relationship.
Nice.
But look, I'm probably gonna sound like a horrible snob, but I've tried Facebook professionally, and I just find the level of conversation on Twitter is so much more intelligent, and you can have direct, meaningful interactions with people who are so much higher up the food chain than myself. Like journalists and broadcasters and stuff like, which I really value, because you can, if they're willing to, you can have these interesting direct exchanges with them and build up, Twitter friends or Twitter relationships with people, which I really like, and I find that's really interesting and fantastic.
I mean, even for this podcast, which is something that I do as a hobby, it is a love of mine, and someday I would like to turn it into something that's quasi profitable, but it's a bit niche in a way. I mean, it is Japan. I do get there's thousands of you awesome people out there who listen each month. I get thousands of cool folks around the world download this show, which I'm very thankful for. But like I've had some opportunities that arose from Twitter. For example, I was on BBC Radio 5 over the Christmas holiday talking about Japan.
Oh, awesome.
And that
That's
was,
cool.
they had producers reached out to me. Recently, in the last week, I had a producer from BBC and from Sky News reach out to me. Unfortunately, they wanted me to talk about a topic I don't really want to talk about. They wanted me to talk about Donald Trump. They wanted to talk about Trump and Japan and Trump and
Yeah.
Shinzo Abe, and I'm just like, you know what? I'll come on. I'll talk about pop culture, other news events, silly stuff about food, history, language, but I'm not going to talk about Trump.
Yeah, I
Just
don't blame you for
too much of a lightning rod.
I have a no politics thing on my Twitter as well, and often some of the politics ends up finding its way into all sorts of random things, and I try and stay clear of it all.
Well, yeah, I'm not necessarily anti-politics. I'll do a little bit. I mean, I make my views about, say, Trump, for example. It's not a secret, but I don't have the background or the knowledge or the expertise to go on to a major news show and talk about a topic like that.
Nah, fair enough.
You know what I mean? I know there are some people. I know some people who probably would jump at the chance to just get on the radio. But it's like, you know what? I'm going to clearly sound like someone who has no idea what he's talking about. I mean, what I know about the topic is what I read in the newspaper, and that's it.
Sounds like you made a smart choice there.
Yeah, but it was really awesome that these people reached out to me through Twitter, which was cool, and hopefully more people will do that in the future about kind of less incendiary topics. Yeah,
it's a great platform, and I think, if you're posting cool content in stuff which is interesting people and engaging with people, then you get noticed and you can form interesting relationships with people in the same field or people you look up to, and I really value that.
Absolutely.
And I love Periscope as well, which is something I'm kind of randomly exploded a little quicker than I was expecting. I really kind of dig doing the whole live broadcast thing as well.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to develop and do more of as well.
Yeah,
I just got to put my thinking cap on and think of some ways to kind of do some cool stuff with it.
Yeah, it's a really cool tool that I need to use that more often as well. I always forget about it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's there, that really cool thing.
Yeah, there's so many options.
Yeah,
I know.
like
Instagram, and there's only so many you can.
Now you can put
the heat of the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Video on Instagram. Video was once upon a time was 20 seconds. Now it's a minute, and who knows where it's going to be after this. And a lot of stuff out there. Well, you know what, James, I don't want to keep you too long. It's getting late in the evening, and I'm sure you got to do a lot of things. So, with regards to Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, can you share with the Just Japan podcast listeners where they can find you on the social medias?
Yeah, sure. Well, the big one is my favorite one is Twitter, and that's the one I'm most active on. So that's at Earth Uncut TV, and my Periscope is the same handle as well. And as you kindly mentioned before, my YouTube is Earth Uncut TV as well. So if you just search for that, you'll find lots of crazy videos of strong winds blowing things away and rocks flying through the air and
a lot of good
big
stuff.
waves.
Yeah,
and now lots of snow. That's my new thing.
That's awesome. So everyone, I'll again go to the show notes at justjapanstuff.com, and under this episode 145, and all the links will be there. I'm also going to post a bunch of videos. Some of the things we talked about tonight, I'm going to post those video links there as well, so people can check those out. And yeah, well, James, thank you for coming on the podcast this evening.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much for thanks for having me on, and it's like a nice welcome to Japan.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Great to have you here.
All right, all the best. You take care of yourself.
Now that was really cool. I really enjoyed talking to James. What a life of coolness and adventure. He's a risk taker. He's a man who does some pretty important work, some pretty impressive and amazing work. I want to thank James for taking the time to stop by the Just Japan podcast. All of you guys out there, go and follow him on Twitter. Go check out his YouTube page. We already mentioned the links, and all those links will be over at justjapanstuff.com. Go check him out under episode 145. James, again, thank you. And all of you guys go out there and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Follow him on Twitter and all that stuff, because there's a lot of cool stuff that pops up in his Twitter feed as well. All right. Well, hey, like I've already mentioned, we've got a new merchandise campaign for the Just Japan podcast. You can support the show by picking up a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a coffee mug. It's all over on teespring.com. All that information is all over the social media, of course, and at justjapanstuff.com. You can follow me on Twitter at jlandkev. You can send me an email anytime with questions or comments about the podcast over at justjapanpodcast@gmail.com. Check out the Facebook page. It's a place where lots of stuff happens. I'm very active over there. I'm very active on Twitter as well. So that's facebook.com/justjapanstuff. Yeah. That just about does it for another week of the podcast. I want to thank you guys for being awesome enough to stop by and listen, to download the podcast and share it with your friends. And that's another great way. If you don't have a couple of bucks hanging around or kicking around to buy a t-shirt, you can simply support the Just Japan podcast by sharing it with people out there and spreading the word of the podcast. Sharing it on your social media. That's the way to do it. Yeah. All right, guys. My name's Kevin. I'm a Canadian. I live in Kobe, Japan. And I make a podcast. You've just listened to the podcast yet again. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining. Go check out the back episodes. There's 144 of them, plus with bonus and news. You can expect the Just Japan News podcast to drop in just a few days. That is a selection of some of the top news stories coming out of Japan. So that's it, guys. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling healthy, which is rare this time of year for me to be feeling healthy. So folks, wherever you are in the world, I hope you are happy. I hope you are healthy. I'll be talking to you again real soon.